Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Um, this is yet another in our series of track talks. Joining us is Robby Foley, who's generously sharing his time. Um, this is Robby and one of his Turner cars. I'm not sure how old this photo is.
I think
Um,
that looks like 2019. 2019 Detroit.
okay. And to give you an idea of some of his background, it's pretty extensive. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure, yeah. So I drive for BMW as a works driver, mainly in North America, in the IMSA series and the SRO series with Turner Motorsport, primarily driven for other BMW teams. Also, over the past couple of years, um, I started formally with BMW in 2021, but had raced previously in different categories, a couple championships along the way, and have been super lucky to do some of the biggest endurance races in the world.
Yeah, that's those are some pretty amazing races that you've done. Okay,
Yeah,
so we're here to talk about Laguna. This is a basic track map, 11 numbered corners. Aerial photo looks a bit like this. What you can't see is the tremendous elevation change. And it's not just elevation, but parts of it are very, very steep. Do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah. So Laguna is a super unique track in that you have all kinds of different corners, fast, slow. A lot of them are blind as a result of the elevation, blind on the entries and exits, which we'll get into in some of the different slides, but for sure makes for a unique track. One that takes a lot of repetition to like understand where to place the car. Things that become routine in your first couple laps are a little bit daunting, just due to the elevation, blind nature, and yeah, the high speeds with all that.
So one thing that's interesting is there are some changes that happen in corners. Turn six, for example, even turn nine, it's kind of subtle, but there's a change of slope in the corner. So and five is another one where you're starting to head uphill. So we'll get into that, but you need to think in terms of three dimensions. So I'll start with just sort of some logistics. We'll enter the track near this start finish bridge. I'll show you how you get to the pit lane. You'll wait for a marshal. You stay all the way left. Many years ago, people would pop out onto the main track, but cars may be doing 120 miles per hour. So you don't. This is the preferred way, and you want to stay left all the way to turn three here. And in a car, it looks like this. You're headed out from the start finish bridge, and you follow all that. It used to be called the motorcycle entry. Follow that all the way around and stay left all the way. So we've covered that. You do your nice little warm up lap, and we'll dive right into it with your first flying lap coming out of turn 11 onto the main straight. So take it away, Robbie.
Yeah, so here, kind of the first of these blind sections. As you head out of turn 11, there's a natural kind of arc you'll want to take down the straight, veering slightly left, and ultimately, your eyes should be pointed towards that bridge under the start finish area. Ultimately, this is a straight, but there's a bend in it as you head into turn two. So turn one is kind of this long sweep over this hill, which is generally, in a race car, at least flat out. In some of the road cars, you need to have a little bit of a breathe. And for sure, the car placement here is very critical as you approach that blind hill. So the first few laps, it's important to pick a spot on the bridge where you're going to place the car. There's some visuals that can help, that we'll get into. Yeah. So basically, shooting for somewhere between the O and the N is generally a good place to be. That puts you on a trajectory to end up in sort of the middle of the track, middle to 3/4 right, approaching what is, the next part of turn one. That sets you up directly for turn two. So at this point, you can't see what's ahead of you. So it takes some repetition to understand where to place the car to, end up in the right spot over that hill. There are three basically telephone style poles. You kind of want to place the car, in the middle, middle or just right of middle. In this car, the GT4 here, where we have the slides from, it's very easy to take turn one flat, so it's a little bit less critical. But the more you can set up a little bit to the right to then have a bit of an apex as we head into the braking zone for turn two, that'll put you kind of in the right place. So the ultimate goal here is to end up parallel to the right side of the road, with a slight angle in towards turn two to brake hard in a straight line. So here we're kind of approaching the brake zone. Again, trying to get parallel to the right side of the road. You'll notice as I go into the corner, as I brake, there's a natural kind of straight line to the left. I'm headed straight for that apex, which allows me to brake hard in a straight line and maximize, what the grip of the tire and what it gives me in a straight line, and take a double apex approach to turn two.
So looking at this diagram, would you have more of a straight line and angled into that apex?
Yeah, slightly. And it depends a little bit on each individual car, but the idea is, obviously our cars can brake the best in a straight line. That's where 100% of the tire grip can be used longitudinally, going straight. So key to lap time at Laguna is, braking hard and late into turn two. So the straighter you can be, the better. This graphic does a good job of showing you need to set up to the right. A lot of that is dictated by how you go through turn one and under the bridge. Ultimately trying to get yourself straight to brake for turn two. Here's one of the past start finish. Obviously, there's a marshal stand at start finish, but this is a great, very visible marshal post to tell you what's going on through turn two. So always important to have your eyes out, looking for any kind of information, yellow flag, debris flag, etc. This one station mans essentially all of turn two. As we break in here, you can't really see the exit of turn two. So this corner station is your eyes for the rest of the corner. And yeah, here's the first apex of turn two. I always take a traditional double apex approach here, especially with the new pavement. There used to be some alternate lines on the old pavement that could provide some more grip, but now that the track is repaved, this line actually has the most grip because that's where most people run. So you're eyeing, the famous tall curbs at Laguna to mark the apexes, staying off of the yellow, but you can nibble some of the red and white to help out the radius of the corner. You just want to stay away from the yellow, which is a high raised curb. Here we're, again, trying to brake as late as possible in turn two in a straight line. And you can see on the bottom left of the screen, the brake trace. I'm still on quite a bit of brake pressure, trying to trail the brake through the first apex to carry in maximum entry speed. Taking a double apex approach, we want to maximize our entry speed and our exit, kind of giving up the mid corner slightly. So you'll notice I brake very late, try to carry the brake in as long as possible to carry that extra speed before finishing the rotation of the car for the second apex.
So in the classroom, a lot of times we talk about riding the edge of the friction circle, and you can see that here just beautifully. heavy braking and heavy cornering force simultaneously. And on a few of the corners where opportunity for trail braking, I kind of highlight what's going on with the braking and friction circle.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And you can see there's about half the brake pressure combined with steering. So obviously, I'm sure we're all familiar with string theory. When you're braking in a straight line, you can brake with 100% when your hands are straight. As you turn in, you have to basically trade some brake pressure for steering angle. So turn two is a great representation of that.
That's very interesting in the pavement change. Some people like to what I call the school bus line. They just they're way wide of this first apex, but it sounds like with the new pavement that would not make sense.
Yeah, I don't think so. On the old pavement, because the line was so run in, if you went slightly off the line or off a traditional line, there was pretty decent grip. That line would yield you an amazing exit, but you'd be giving up a lot of time on the entry. And I think with the new pavement, that's just going to be slower. But the track, will evolve over the years as, the old pavement was fairly low grip and at the end of its life. So for now, I think the traditional double apex is clearly the way.
It's a little
Um,
hard to see, but there's the yellow curb of the second apex.
yeah, and my goal is to essentially always be parallel to that with the car as I'm exiting, and just beyond the yellow, you can see as the curb finishes with white. The more parallel you can be to that, the straighter your angle off, the more aggressive you can be on the throttle. Where if you come at the second apex at too shallow of an angle, you'll have a lot of steering angle in at the apex. And as you try to apply throttle, you can often, in a rear wheel drive car, potentially have an understeer that snaps to an oversteer or just purely an oversteer. So the idea is to end up not super wide in the mid corner, but wide enough to where you can really rotate the car and sort of have the left side tires parallel, but to the end of that curb, and that will help your exit tremendously.
Yeah, I think the looking at the black marks on the apex curbing gives you a real good idea where a lot of people put their cars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Robby, are you using much throttle steering midway through, right where this car is positioned? In my car with very little downforce, I tend to want to be in a lower gear to get the rear end to rotate out a bit.
So in the cars that I drive, we try to stay away from steering with the throttle. If you find yourself having to be very early on the throttle to do that, I would challenge you to try braking a little bit later and trailing the brake a little bit longer. A lot of it is different based on different cars and due to setup. But in this corner in this car, I trail the brake in one motion, release. There's a small coast period, and once I pick up the throttle, I go to essentially full throttle in one kind of linear motion. That helps take care of the rear tires. And that tends to be the quickest way in the cars that I drive. If you find yourself with a mid-corner understeer needing some rotation, that's okay. But I would challenge you to try to brake a little bit later. And if you can't brake later, trail the brake a little earlier and longer to try to reach your minimum speed at a later point in the corner. I think a key to note here is that I'm reaching my minimum speed well after the first apex towards the mid corner. So give that a shot and see what happens.
Good stuff. Thanks.
So the lap that we're looking at, we posted that to the YouTube channel. So if we're not showing every frame, but you can go look at that and get an idea what's happening. Okay, here we are at the exit.
Yep. So if you're parallel at the second apex, picking up the throttle well, you'll end up fairly parallel to the exit curbing here of turn three. The red and white is totally usable, very flat curbing, just with some minor rumbles. At this point, I'm already thinking ahead towards turn three. You can see that we're headed straight for turn three, but actually the road doesn't doesn't follow a straight line. So a trick that I have, especially a car with higher horsepower, you know, this run from turn 2 to turn 3 happens very quickly. So the quicker you can get back to the left to set up for turn 3, the better your trajectory and angle in is, which is shown very well with this visual. If you don't kind of immediately head back to the left, you'll end up on a very shallow line into turn 3. And at the turn-in point, I don't have a great way to visually show it, but at the turn-in point, the angle of your car will be, let's say, pointed towards the left instead of kind of pointed in towards the corner, where if you're parallel as you can be to the entry curb, effectively your radius is wider and the car is pointed in the right direction. So very critical, not critical, but worth some lap time to really hustle the car back to the left, get parallel to the entry curb of turn 3, which is already headed to the right, to not have to make more of a turn out of it than it is. So here's a good indication of that, how I ended up in that point. I'm exactly parallel or even slightly angled to the right at the brake and turn-in point for turn 3. You can see in pink another Marshall post highlighted there. So very easy visual to see, your information on what's happening ahead. If there's debris, if you've got a blue flag, if you've got a yellow flag, etc. And turn 3 is an interesting corner where it's fairly long in duration, and you don't really have to change a lot of speed, unlike turn 2 where you're entering from your maximum speed on the track into a slow corner. Turn 3 tends to be a moderate brake pressure with a long trail into the corner. So you can see here, bottom left, the general brake pressure is much less than the initial brake for turn 2. And again, I'm trying to trail the brake to a point where I'm carrying my speed to the apex. I want to reach my minimum speed right about at that yellow apex marker. And you can see with the rubber here, the turn-in tends to be fairly early, but with slow hands, just based on the trajectory you need to kind of make this radius work. So a lot of these corners here, you'll hear me say turning early with slow hands as opposed to late and a lot. And that's all due to the long duration nature of the corner and how to manipulate the string theory using the tire to the best of its grip potential.
Hey, Robby, are you tightening the steering? You said slow hands. In this particular turn, I tend to keep tightening up the steering as I'm getting further into the turn. Is that something you're doing?
Yeah, that's generally true. Again, that slow turn-in allows you to carry in a lot of speed because you're not asking too much of the left front tire. So I would say my maximum steering angle is right about now where the picture is. Trying to get that car basically even and parallel with that yellow apex curb. So yeah, I would say that's true. For sure, you don't want to add too much steering too late, but it's kind of a corner where you're just slowly adding steering to the apex. And I'm picking up the throttle on the later side. I'm just about to pick it up right about now. So kind of a longer trail and coast phase than you might expect. And yeah, here headed to the exit. At this point, full throttle, looking ahead under the Continental Bridge. Again, white and red curbing is very safe and usable. I'll use all of that, and that kind of sets you up straight into turn 4, which is what seems to be a fairly straightforward corner, but is always a little bit tricky. So yeah, here's your line for turn 4. There's a couple of little tricks that I've developed over the years. Used to be more of a thing on the old pavement, but there is a natural rhythm between 3 and 4, where I actually like to come off of the curb in turn 3 slightly, and almost set the weight on the left side of the car before turning in for turn 4. But just looking at the corner, it looks fairly straightforward, and it is, but it always tends to be tricky to get a good exit, and you're always sort of fighting the car on the exit. But um, again, looking into turn 4, as many corners at Laguna, you can't totally see the exit, so the marshal post straight ahead of you is very important. If, you know, for a yellow flag, a car spun at the exit. But turn 4 is similar to turn 3 in that you're not braking very hard, and it's a lighter, longer brake with kind of an early slow turn in. Again, similar style effectively, but a higher speed corner. So a little bit easier to make a mistake, and more important to not overdrive any phase of the corner. So the turn in, for me, I'm always eyeing the end of the entry curbing for my turn in point. It tends to be slightly before that, but that's a good visual. And at this point, you can see where the rubber is. You kind of want to be headed to the apex at the start of the curb, but the true apex is right at that yellow apex marker. For some reason here in turn 4, turning in too late, there's just, especially on the new pavement, there's not much grip. So the early slow turn in tends to work. You can see I'm headed for the traditional apex, but I'm sort of in there, you know, a little bit early, starting to pick up the throttle early, as opposed to turn 3 where you carry in speed and you're kind of waiting on the throttle to let the car finish rotating. Here you start to pick up the throttle a little bit on the early side, just with the way the radius of the corner is. And I'll shoot to be full throttle by the apex or just after it. So I'm here slowly squeezing the throttle. I'm right on the yellow curb. Here I've got a good trajectory for the exit. I know I'll make the exit. You can see also with the rubber lines in the road, if you get slightly too wide, you end up in the marbles fairly easily, and it's easy to track out too early here. So positioning at the apex of turn 4 is very critical. Then at this point, we'll slowly squeeze the throttle to be full throttle well before the exit.
Yeah, I think a couple frames after this, you're getting down to full throttle.
Yeah. And here, trying to keep your eyes up as far ahead as you can see. And red and white is a friendly curb, but worth noting that, especially in this corner, at the end of the curb, there's always a big drop off from people running off the track. In our case, in the races, there's a ton of dust getting kicked up here. So you want to leave some margin for sure at the exit of turn 4, just because it's not worth much lap time, and you don't want to fall off the other side of that curbing.
So all those tires on the right side are there for a reason. Big lifts or dropping two and then yanking the car back on. You'll find out what the tires are for.
Yeah, that's a classic Laguna Seca mistake. Happens a couple other corners as well, but tires are definitely there for a reason. And yeah, next up is turn 5. This is one of my favorite corners. As you'll get to see right here, it looks like it's flat and looks reasonably straightforward, but there is a lot of banking and camber gain as you get to the apex, and then you lose it on the way out. So very interesting corner to use that camber.
I've always found if I'm doing it well, as I'm entering the corner, it feels like this is a little fast, and
Yep.
then the camber and the elevation change, like, oh, okay, it worked this time.
Almost catches you at the apex. Yeah, that's totally true. I feel the same way. And you know, in that, you also have to make sure you get into that hill early enough. You know, if you look at the corner from this angle, you could say, oh, maybe a late apex would work. But really here, you have to err on the side of an early apex, just to make sure you get into that hill and use the elevation. So here on the entry again, Laguna is really well marked with marshal posts. Here it's totally in your line of sight. Sort of again, can't see the exit, so very important to be aware of where the flag stands are. Initially, turn 5 is a very heavy brake, but it's a late heavy brake. And the reason you can brake so late is because, as we mentioned earlier, you're headed into what is a very cambered banked corner. So basically you have gravity on your side. Brake marker varies car to car, but initially a hard brake and an early slow turn in with an immediate trail off the brake. And I'm aiming to trail the brake again for a long time to carry in that entry speed. Another long duration corner. So string theory, very important here. I'm trying to essentially roll in maximum speed to the apex, allow the car to rotate before picking up the throttle aggressively. So here we're still gaining grip on the way to the apex. The maximum grip, let's say in the corner, is just at the apex where we have the most banking. So right about now, you can see I'm early to the apex, slightly before the yellow. I'm going to, finish wrapping around the curb just past the yellow to stay in that banking. And I'm starting to pick up the throttle just now as I'm, maximum grip through the corner. Here in IMSA, at least where this video is shot, we have the ability to run out fairly wide. Yeah, it's a good way to describe it. Bonus pavement. There can be less grip out there, and there is also less camber. So the track is effectively sort of like this, where just beyond the curbing and that drain, it drops off camber. In this case, in this GT4 car, it was worth some lap time to use that extra radius. And as we know, radius equals speed. But I would be wary of that depending on what track event you're at. It might not be worth it, and the track could be dirty out there. So the keys to this corner basically are to pick up the throttle just about at the apex and try to squeeze to full as soon as you can. It's worth noting that you are losing grip constantly on as you exit the corner. You're losing that camber, losing that advantage you had at the apex. So it takes a little bit of time to understand where to pick up the throttle and how aggressively, as you are losing a little bit of grip leaving the corner.
I think with the novices and lower intermediates, that extra pavement, it's good to look at that as an extra cushion, a margin to use if you mess up, if you're early apex or whatever. If you get in the habit of using it and the traction is not so good and the camber's falling away, now you don't have any room to make mistakes. So we love having a little bit of room to make mistakes. And the more advanced drivers, play with it, look at what that does to your lap.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. Next is turn 6. I would say, well, there's many unique corners at Laguna, but this is, for me, the most challenging and most unique corner, just because it's very high commitment with very little margin for error. So as we get into the pictures, obviously just now looking at it from above, looks fairly straightforward, but there's a huge elevation change. And as Mark talked about, one of the corners where the elevation changes fairly significantly through the corner. So we'll get into it with the next couple of slides. Again, a very well-marked corner station. Here entering turn 6, that pavement that you saw, extra pavement on the right of turn 5, that sort of comes to an end in turn 6. So if you are experimenting with that pavement in turn 5, it's important to get off of it. The entry for turn 6, it never really pays off to be on the entry curb or that pavement. So you want to be on the track surface. The initial brake here is, I would say, moderate in most cars. The reason for that is a few reasons. You're not losing too much speed, but also you want to control the weight shift of the car a little bit more carefully than some of the other corners, because eventually your turn-in is downhill before we pick up a lot of grip at the apex. So the car feels light all the way to the apex. Once you get to the apex, you gain a ton of grip and a big vertical G and impact. And you have that grip generally to the exit. But the brake pressure here is moderate. It's very important here to avoid the big yellow apex bump, because of the nature of the corner, it's very high grip, fast, and you get that big vertical G when you fall into this kind of bowl. The effect of the camber and banking you gain is similar to turn 5, but it's more aggressive and more sudden. Where turn 5 slowly kind of banks you into the corner, here you sort of fall into this point of where we are right about now, where the car really has a big vertical G spike and gain in grip. So the most important thing is your car placement at this exact point. Too far left, you'll hit that yellow apex bump, and that can really do some damage just due to the high G nature of the corner. You can bend a wheel, hurt a strut, all kinds of different stuff. So you want to put your left side tires right into that apex curve, but not too far left. And equally too far right, you're missing that grip of the banking. So there's very, very little margin for error in your car placement in turn 6. So this is the corner that should take you the longest to get comfortable and the longest to attack, just because it's very high risk and high reward. But car placement ultimately is very critical. And you can see, ideally by this point, you're full throttle and headed for the exit. Right after you leave the apex, again, there's a huge vertical G kind of compression. Then you come out of it and you've had little grip on the entry, you gain a lot of grip, and then you slowly lose it on the exit, which you don't feel as much as that lack of grip on the entry. So just to summarize, there's a change in grip 3 different times through the corner as you change that elevation. Exiting out of 6, there is some extra green runoff that's usable, but again, very high risk and low reward. So I would urge you to avoid that until you're very comfortable looking for the last couple tenths of a second. To give yourself some margin going off here in turn 6, you can easily save it in the dirt, but I've seen a lot of people go off and find the tire wall here too. So probably the highest commitment corner on the track, and one that definitely deserves respect.
Hey, Robby, going back to the turn in for turn 6. So I find this turn, the timing is the most critical in this turn over any other turn on the track. Is it?
Yep.
How are you sizing up when to start the turn in? It seems it's just a very fast turn in my experience.
Yep. I don't have a visual reference because the turn in exact point changes on the different cars that I drive between the cars we race in IMSA. But in general, as you crest the hill, your sight picture expands, I guess. It's actually hard to see the apex when you're braking. But my turn in is not super abrupt and fast. It's again kind of early and slow, where you want to do everything gently with the car, because as you crest the hill, the rear of the car can get light, where if you turn too fast, you get this oversteer on the entry. So I'm kind of trying to be nice and smooth with all my inputs, brake and steering initially, until the car starts to gain grip. The only aggressive input I have is potentially getting back to the throttle fairly aggressively. But in most cars, I'm actually fairly early and gentle on the throttle, because I'm trying to settle the rear as it lands sort of over that hump on the entry. So for me, it's all about car placement, and each individual car, you're going to have a slightly different turn-in point here. So repetition and figuring out what works best is kind of the really only way to attack it. Yeah. Like for example, the GT3 car I drive has a lot more downforce, so you can be more aggressive. But in general, I would say if you're looking for a reference, it's just before this white bit of the curb kind of starts. So maybe back up one more slide, see if we can see that point. But yeah, sort of. There's a two marker, which is the first brake marker we see, and then a 1 marker. I'm turning in between those two. But again, with a slow kind of early turn in, you can see we're going up a hill, and then right where the darkest parts of the pavement are is where you drop in. So you're trying to start that turn in before you drop in, to where you gain camber at the apex.
Anything else on turn 6? Okay, we'll head up to the top of the hill now.
Yep. Here's the traditional black flag station at Laguna on driver's left. Again, very visible. If you're in trouble and getting black flag, you'll certainly know. Right in the line of sight. In the corkscrew now, there is some extra pavement. There always sort of has been. I took what seemed to be not a unique approach, but I didn't see a lot of other drivers doing it in IMSA. Some did, some didn't. But effectively, what I'm trying to do here is set up my braking as straight as I can, headed into the corkscrew, to basically allow me to get the maximum radius for turning in left down the hill. So for me, that was using the extra pavement on the left. In the next series of slides, you'll see that in the circled portion, I'm basically as far left as I can go to then open the corner to then get as far right as I can go. But if you're looking at the dashed lines, which indicate braking markers, by the time we get to the last braking marker in the corkscrew, I want to be as parallel as I can be to the entry curbing. And a common mistake is, let's say, apexing where the second brake marker is, so one brake marker back on the right, apexing there and then ending up drawing a straight line to the apex at like a diagonal where you're losing a lot of cornering radius on the entry. You can brake quite well and late there, but it doesn't tend to yield the same lap time as you can actually brake later on this line and trajectory and have more cornering speed mid-corner at the top of the corkscrew. So that's my approach to the new pavement there on driver's left entry to that brake zone, which has always given me a straight braking approach, which allows me to brake later and harder than other people who are on a different trajectory. And then by the time I get to the corkscrew, I've got a lot of radius, can carry more mid-corner speed through the top of the corkscrew.
How much of that berm are you using on the right? The driving line there doesn't show any.
On the new pavement, you're talking about the entry curve on the
Yeah,
right.
the entry curb on the right, correct.
On the new pavement, I used none of it because the track itself in the cars that we drive with the tires we drive, the track pavement itself had far more grip than the curb, or there is green beyond that curb, which we can see in the next slides. On the old pavement, I used to use all of that green to brake and open the corner even more. But in trying that, there was far less grip. So now we can see sort of the green on the right. I used to put my right side tires all the way up on that green to, again, open the radius as much as possible. But I found I couldn't brake as late and I wasn't gaining any lap time as a result. So here we're seeing that that green on the right. You'll see some drivers using that, but I found that braking on the pavement allowed me to brake later and carry more entry speed. So this is the trajectory we're looking for entering the corkscrew. Again, if you do experiment with the green, you can angle yourself in slightly earlier, but I found less grip there. You get another corner station here, driver's left. This is probably the most visible because it's very raised. This covers you, down the hill where you can't see anything. So watch for yellows here. It's, fairly common for drivers to spin at the bottom of the corkscrew. So just be heads up. Here, I'm trying to, again, get as parallel as I can to the right side of the road. On the trajectory and line that I'm on, I'm still on a very hard brake pressure because my hands are straight. I'm on good grippy pavement and I'm trying to maximize my braking efficiency. My turn-in point is basically following the rubber here towards the end of the entry curve on the right. But I do turn in fairly early for the corkscrew because you gain a lot of, again, not a lot, but you gain some banking and camber as you get towards the apex. So this is
the old what I read a long time ago was you were supposed to lift a little bit at the crest coming into the entry. But if you're braking, if you're in a straight line, you really don't have to, do you?
Yeah, so that's correct. You do, depending on your car and ABS, or if you don't have ABS, you might need to slightly. In this case, based on the new line that I'm on, I didn't really have to. But on the old track, with more of a kind of, you had to be kind of snaking the car through there a little bit more. I did have a wavy brake trace to relieve a little bit of brake pressure over that crest to not lock tires or get into the ABS too hard. But it's certainly less of an event now with the extra track grip on the new pavement and this line that I was taking.
Yeah, that was kind of my question too, is when are you braking? Do you brake before the crest or do you brake right on top of the crest?
Definitely car dependent. It depends how much power and speed you're carrying up the hill. In general, before the crest. So here you can see this is probably my heaviest brake pressure. The GT4 cars, we can brake quite late, but you definitely want to be braking before the crest. In some cases, this is very abnormal in talking about a brake trace, but you might roll into the brake slightly depending on what kind of car you're in and how fast you're going in, because just after the crest is where you can really brake hard and have your maximum efficiency. So right here, in any car that any of you guys are driving, you should be super hard on the brake. How you get to this point is very variable depending on what you're driving. For me, in the GT3 car, which has more grip than this, better tires, etc., I was braking at or past the crest, but in the GT4 car, not possible. And depending on what sort of cars you guys are driving, also likely not possible. So the initial brake point is variable. And I would say the only consistent thing is at this point in the brake zone, you should be very efficient on the brakes, meaning your hands as straight as you can be, as hard on the brake as you can be to maximize the fact that your tires are straight. You can use all your braking or all your tire grip in a longitudinal direction.
Yeah, that
So-
makes sense. And I think what Fred was asking is if you brake before the crest, you can keep that pressure now with the new pavement, or do you let up a little bit?
If you're going straight over it, you can keep, let's say, most or all of the pressure, and it's not going to negatively affect you. But it's very critical to basically be straight. So you'd have to use all of the road on the left, turn right effectively, and get straight over it. So it's certainly less of an adjustment than it used to be. It's hard to say for certain without driving the specific car, but for sure you'll have to breathe out of the brake less than you used to.
Okay.
So I have a question on the approach to the apex here. I take a pretty defensive line so that I'm braking almost to the apex so that I get a lot of front end grip right at that yellow berm. I'm wondering what your approach is, whether you're taking a wide entry or a tighter entry. It looks like you're pretty tight here.
Yep. Just going back one slide, initially I'm wide. It depends, if you're talking about a racing situation, then somebody could dive down the inside, but I'm wide initially, but again, turning in fairly early just because of the way the road gains camber at the apex. So I do reach the apex before the traditional one. And kind of wrap around that apex. So this is fairly early. You can see the red and white curb. Just left of that is a little bit of green that you can see some rubber marks on. I am touching the green, staying off of the yellow. The yellow is a high raised curb that will do some damage to your car, but I'm in there fairly early to use that basic advantage of the banking and the camber at the apex. And I end up right about here. And this puts you kind of exactly where you want to be for dropping down the corkscrew. At this point, you gain some grip right at the apex, but you're about to lose it as you go and fly over the top. So almost like turn one entry to turn two, a little bit like turn 6. it takes quite some repetition and laps to get the rhythm here of where to place the car. A great initial reference point is the tree that's circled here. That if you aim for that will put you in a safe position at the bottom of the hill as you apex on the right. Slightly, as you can see, I'm pretty much lined up with that. As you get a little bit more comfortable and slightly more greedy, you end up maybe slightly right of the tree to grab a little bit more of the curb at the bottom. Right at this point, you're about to have this feeling of weightlessness for a moment where your car drops down. One trick I found, or key I found over the years, as you can see, I already have some right-hand steering lock on. I'm trying to head to the right, but if you wait until the car lands at the bottom of the hill to do that steering to the right, you're always going to be a little bit late to the party when you get to the bottom of the hill. So as you gain confidence, you can actually turn slightly earlier to the right than what's natural. So your first few laps, pick up that tree, drive straight over the hill with a good margin of error. And as you get confident with where to place the car at the top of the hill, you can start to pick up the throttle slightly earlier at this point and then turn a little earlier to the right. But the further right you go, to the point where you go too far right, then you're going to have a huge compression point at the bottom of the hill. And when you go too far right, you certainly know you end up on all four bump stops and get a nice shot up your spine. So not that I've done that before, maybe once or twice. But you're effectively cutting a little bit of the corner, and your car is headed already to turn 9, where if you go straight down the hill and turn right at the bottom of the hill, you're taking a little bit longer of a line than necessary. So this is sort of where you'll end up carrying maximum speed. How far left you can exit the corkscrew is very car dependent based on how easy it is to get back to the right. And this is one of the few corners on the track where I think there's multiple lines to take in turn 9. But similar to your exit of turn 2 into turn 3, exiting the corkscrew at the bottom of 8A, you want to try to hustle the car back to the right as quickly as possible. So you can see I've got a lot of steering lock on to the right. My eyes are up. Circled in pink here is your next flag marshal post, which again, turn 9, you can't see the exit. So very critical here, critical information for what's headed, on the exit of turn 9. This corner is the longest corner on the track, very fast, high commitment, has a nice flow to it. But because of that, there's a lot of space to use on the entry. So we'll talk about a couple different approaches. The one pictured here, I'm fairly tight on the entry because of how the grip was on the IMSA race weekend and how our car was handling. I didn't gain a lot by opening the radius. There's a few reasons for that. You can see a natural banking in the track. There's more banking the further inside you are. The further wide you are, there's less. And on the IMSA race weekend, just where cars were running, there was far more grip here, and our car was behaving in such a way that if I was further to the right, I had an understeer and struggled to get back to the left. So you're in a street car or something on, let's say, more of a DOT tire, you're probably looking to enter mid-track. And the apex here is a late apex, but you can see if you're looking at the white line on the left side of the track, that the radius of the corner changes a lot. So you're basically, ignore the white line on the left side of the track. You're trying to draw a natural arc to the apex curbing, which is actually a fairly long apex curbing. You'll enter the apex curbing early and kind of wrap around it. But at this point, just go back one slide. At this point, you're doing your speed adjustment over a long duration. So a common mistake here is to brake hard and abruptly early, then clear the brake and either coast or pick up the throttle too soon. Here you want, again, to use the friction circle of the tire, the grip you have available to brake light to moderate, but trail the brake as long as you can, and then into a coast phase where you're coasting off the pedals, but you're still losing speed. So you don't want to overslow the entry to keep it simple. And then to the next slide, you'll see where we end up as we get to the apex. I'm exactly parallel to the apex of 9. I've gained a little bit of grip as I head to the apex. You can see there is a banking in the track that you kind of lose on the exit. And by the apex, you want to be on full throttle, headed for the exit of 9. There is some pavement there on the exit of 9, much like turn 5, but you don't have a lot of time to set up for turn 10. So in this car, I avoid it. And just like we spoke about in turn 2 to turn 3, just like we spoke about exit of the corkscrew, here you have to hustle the car back to the left to set up for turn 10 and get parallel to that entry curbing. So turn 10, again, looking above, looks very simple, but as we get into it, there's a big gain of grip as you head to the apex with a camber change. You gain a lot of banking headed to the apex. There's a flag marshal station circled in pink straight ahead. So again, a good visual for your information for turn 10 and headed into 11. Initial braking in turn 10 is, again, one of those moderate brakes that you kind of try to carry for a little while. You're trying to get into the corner early, carry a lot of speed. Your maximum grip comes right at the apex. So my brake pressure here is moderate. And I'm set up early to the left. I'm parallel to the entry curb. Again, like turn 3, my car is like this. If you end up set up for turn 10 like this, you don't have the advantage of that radius. You really need to get all the way back to the left, parallel to that entry curb, to kind of have the maximum radius of the corner. Turn-in is initially early but slow. Again, a long duration corner. You want to get into the banking as early as you can. At this point, very important to eye the apex, that yellow big curb. But like turn 6 here, there's a pretty good vertical G spike at the apex. If you put your right side tires on that yellow curb, good chance you bend a wheel or do some damage to the car. So you got to get right up to it, but not on top of it. Again, early apex here, you can see all the banking you have. This allows you to pick up the throttle fairly early. And you want to squeeze to full throttle kind of in one motion. Worth noting, you do lose grip on the exit. Much like turn 4, it's common for people to drop left side tires in the dirt here. For some reason, I've talked to the track about this actually, there's no tire wall on the right, so only concrete, but I've seen cars drop a wheel, left rear, try to come back on too fast and crash to the right. So white and red curb, very friendly, exit of turn 10. Beyond that, there's a big drop off, and you don't want to really get out there in the sand. So turn 10, one of those corners where you have a lot of banking, you need to use it, and takes a series of laps to find the rhythm there of how to place the car at the apex.
Robby, I noticed the one time I did a sim in a full sim situation that the physics was wrong on turn 10 on the program. It wasn't giving you the benefit of that camber at the apex.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. Which sim was it? Do you remember? What software?
I was at the Porsche experience in LA, and it was on one of their sim machines.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, as we know, I think you definitely benefit from just the pure physics of it. Gravity is helping you, with banking and stuff like that. So I've never been able to use an alternate line that doesn't maximize the banking and gain lap time from it. So I would say stick to what you know, but it's interesting that the sim didn't replicate that. Now headed to the last corner, turn 11. I would say the most straightforward corner, but still has some unique nuance. Worth noting, this is where you enter the pits on driver's left. and the pit entry, the corner, just the apex of where you enter the pit lane is very tight. So heads up there. Your initial brake is very hard in a straight line here. It's kind of a straightforward 90-degree corner. You want to be parallel to the curbing, well by the 3 marker. Again, depending on your car, what kind of tires you have and power, etc., will determine your initial brake point. But it's a heavy brake zone where you want to maximize your straight line braking efficiency. When you're in a straight line, you should be as hard on the brake as you can be. The corner here is fairly flat, although you do have a small change in elevation at the apex. It kind of drops in this nice sort of rhythm. The apex is fairly early because of that drop in. You should be trailing the brake past the turn-in point to use the maximum tire grip you have, and get right up to that yellow curb at the apex. This yellow curb happens to be the most friendly. I still recommend staying off of it. On certain laps, I hit it to kind of try to rotate the car a little bit. But you do turn in early, but you're looking for not an early apex. So your turn in is slow, you're trailing the brake, using the grip of the tire. At the apex, you want to have a really defined rotation to get a straight, clean exit. At this point, you should be looking to the exit, starting to pick up the throttle. And on the exit, you can use maximum all of the road available to you. Again, be careful and wary of the sand and the drop off from the green, but there's good grip on the green, the red and white. It's all fairly safe to use. Just leave some margin there before you get to the sand, but you should be very easily full throttle by now. If you find yourself struggling to get full throttle or understeering to the exit or just getting a bad exit, slow yourself down at the apex, have a more defined rotation, and the exit here is really critical as it leads on to the longest straight.
Hey, Robby, can you explain how you get the rotation? You mentioned you want to get a lot of rotation at the apex. How are you achieving that?
With a trail brake and a long trail brake, and your brake release is very important how quickly you do it. A common mistake here is picking up the throttle too early, which transfers weight to the rear axle, gives you an understeer, and that can either snap into an oversteer or cause you to be late to full throttle. So the key here is to get the good exit. You want to be the first person to full throttle, where picking up the throttle a little bit too early will cause you to be late to full throttle. So for me, it's all about the initial brake, hard on the brake in a straight line, trailing the brake smoothly to get that rotation.
Robby, my experience with Turn 11 is because it's such a slow corner on the track that you can actually take a nibble of the dirt at the apex. And I saw some dirt on the apex at that point. So it looks like some other people were doing that. And
Yep.
Are the rumble strips still there on the exit on the red and white?
Yep. So I guess first point about the apex, you definitely can be greedy with the curb there. I don't tend to go to the dirt. I go on the yellow sometimes, which ultimately just after that, you kick up a little bit of dirt. Further left in the yellow, you'll end up probably scraping the bottom of the car and losing grip. But you can definitely experiment if you're comfortable with that yellow curb. What happens there is as the left rear of your car crosses that yellow curb, that vertical shot kind of transfers weight in such a way to rotate the car. In general, all the cars I've driven, it's a nice rotation, but depending on your car, it can over-rotate the car. So if you're very comfortable with the track and driving it well, you can certainly play with that to try carrying in a little more speed, hitting that yellow to A, you have more radius because the corner is wider, and B, that impact to the left rear as the left rear crosses over the curb can give you some rotation. And your second question, the curbing is, yeah, exactly as it's shown here, as far as I know. I was last there in May, so I think it's all the same.
So it's important to straddle those rumble strips so you don't lose speed over them.
Yeah, when I raced, the rumble strips had good grip also, but I tend to have the right side tires on the green, and the left side tires on the rumble strip was also fine. So the grip loss on the rumble strip wasn't terrible, but that's kind of day and car dependent based on how much rubber is down, and you know, if they just recently repainted them, they'll be more slick. So you have to play it by ear a bit, but for sure you can go with your right side tires beyond it to the green. The green had plenty of grip.
Okay, so that's a full lap. I just wanted to cover a little bit more of the sort of logistics of getting off the track. As Robby mentioned, the pit entrance is here on the left as you approach turn 11. We're using these two gates to get onto the track and off of the track, or going into the pit and leaving the pit. If you got a black flag, you continue on. Our black flag station will be near the bridge. And what it looks like in the car, you're coming out at 10 instead of looking to the right for 11. Set up for 11, you're going to look to the left to that road. Once you signal, don't change your mind. Even if you want to go back on track, just go through pit lane. And here's that tight corner. So it's 11's the tightest corner, except this corner inside of 11 is even tighter. So take it slow. So that is our presentation. Thanks a lot, Robby. This is all great information. And the lap is available. It's amazing. I watched multiple laps of that, and they're just the way you hit your marks over and over again is really impressive. Do we have questions from anybody? Any further questions about anything?
I'm wondering what the tire dag's like on the new pavement.
Very, very little. Depending on the tire and the car you're driving. I would say in our cars, you certainly feel like a peak in a new tire. But as you run and your fuel burns off over a stint, there's very little loss in lap time. So relative to before, where the track had super high dag, you could see in our cars easy 3 seconds. Now it's very little.
Yeah, Sonoma has a similar trait with the new pavement, which is much higher grip, much lower wear. I don't know how they're achieving it.
Yeah, it's the same with Laguna, and the reason for that is like if you had pictures or just looked at the pavement of both scenarios, the old pavement is very like stony, and there's like basically it's worn down to that sticky stuff in the pavement that is basically connecting the stones is gone more or less. So like Laguna, the old track in turn 2, if you did a track walk, the center of the track was almost like a cheese grater, literally, and that's what it's doing to your tires. And when that happens, your surface temperature of the tire goes up quite a bit, and that's just pulling rubber off. So it's for a few reasons. You have less tire actually on the ground. The heat created is much higher. And it's counterintuitive, but oftentimes a higher grip surface produces less tire temperature and less wear. So a cool effect on both. But we found the same at Sonoma. When I raced there this year, there was so much grip in the track and whatever happened with their pavement that we actually were tearing the pavement off the ground. So we found the same. The lap times you'll probably see about 3 seconds faster on both tracks, and you won't drop off as much, and it won't eat your tires up.
Wow, cool.
Robby, on the old track, there used to be the red sausage curves way inside that were told to me to be something to do with the motorcycles. I've noticed they're gone under this new configuration.
Yeah, they're still there. They're just yellow now. They just repainted them. They are slightly lower just because the track, well, they're not really lower, but in some spots the track surface has risen slightly. But the curbs themselves are the same, and they're just painted yellow now. So it's interesting to know that it's for motorcycles. I didn't know that, but yeah, they're still there, just yellow.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, everybody. I will I'll try to get this posted later today if anybody wants to watch it again. And thank you very much, Robby. Really appreciate your time. Um, Mike, did you have anything to add?
So I thank Robby for agreeing to do this, and thanks to Turner for allowing the in-car footage. And good luck at Barber this weekend, Robby. And I'll see you at the Indy 8-hour.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it. It was fun getting to talk to you guys, and hope you all yeah, enjoy the new pavement and some quicker lap times and less tire wear.